In today's video, we're going to talk about the 5 clauses that I wish I would have had in my lease. If I'd had these in prior to renting out a few of my properties, it would have literally saved me tens of thousands of dollars. The first provision you want to make sure you have in is how bugs or particularly pests are addressed in your unit. In my experience in the Midwest, we have things like bed bugs that are pretty common, as well as cockroaches if properties aren't, maintained, kitchens aren't cleaned, food gets left behind, that kind of stuff. On something like a single family house, bed bugs don't just appear, they're typically brought in. There's kind of like a misconception that it's like the tenant's fault, but it could be as simple as they put their gym bag down at the gym next to somebody who had bed bugs. That being said though, they are the ones who bring them in. They don't just kind of like magically appear like something with ants. So you want to make sure that's outlined of how that's going to be addressed. On a single family, our policy is that they have to pay for treatment. On a multifamily, it gets a little bit more complex because they can blame it on the neighbor, and it is possible. So what our leases state now is we'll cover the first treatment, and any subsequent treatments would be split between the residents in that particular building. The second provision that you want to have in your lease is one not many people have in theirs or really think about. That has to do with commercial vehicles. We had a rather expensive, rather unfortunate instance where a resident parked a fully loaded 18-wheeler on our driveway and absolutely destroyed it. Now, it was older concrete, but there wasn't any cracks or anything in it prior to them occupying the property. After he parked his big rig on it one weekend, or maybe a lot of weekends, he was kind of an over-the-road, stay-at-home trucker, ended up causing $12,000 worth of damages, which we did get a judgment for, but if you've ever got a judgment against somebody who skipped out on rent, you know how that goes. Kind of good luck collecting. So it's a good idea to have in your lease some sort of a policy regarding commercial vehicles, storage, things like RVs. You don't want people parking in their yard or anything like that. If you have an HOA, obviously, as well, that could get you in trouble with them. The third clause you want to have in your lease is something with regards to disturbing the peace or quiet hours. Ideally, you want quiet hours outlined, that way they're not causing problems with the neighbors or other tenants. Typically, how I see these go, it's like a 10 p.m. to a 7 a.m. where noise should be kept to a minimum and shouldn't be able to be heard outside of the building. That kind of goes just towards being a good neighbor, particularly if you own nicer properties. You don't want to be the people with the problem property that the neighbors are always complaining about. But if you have other tenants, this is super, super important, particularly in like a duplex, triplex, or quad. You can kind of have one bad apple spoil the bunch, where you may have really good residents that have been there a long time and paid well, but somebody starts to come in and cause trouble, and it's just not fun for anybody to be in that environment. The fourth thing you want to have in your lease, which we've found actually more important with COVID and eviction moratoriums and restrictions and things of that nature, is something with regards to criminal activity. If there's drug dealing going on, if there's parties, basically if the police are showing up and issuing reports, you want the ability to get those people out ASAP. Most states, including ours in Indianapolis, that's the city, including Indiana, still allowed us to do emergency evictions for properties that were having these kinds of problems. So you want it outlined in your lease if the police are showing up, if reports are being made. I don't know if you want to do a 3-strike policy or a 1-strike and you're gone, but that's also helpful to let other tenants know that are in close proximity of, hey, if there's a problem, call the police so we can get them out. Chances are you will need that documentation to get somebody out of the property, especially if things like COVID restrictions continue. So the fifth one I'm going to put in here is really, really odd. We've only ran into this once, but it has to do with surveillance, particularly surveillance cameras. We want our residents to feel safe in our properties. We actually really only own stuff in fairly decent areas, but we did have a resident in an 8-unit apartment that put up like Ring cameras that monitored where other tenants were coming and going. We would literally get, calls into the office with stuff like, hey, so-and-so's boyfriend stayed over again, and I don't know if she's on the lease, or somebody parked a second vehicle and they should only have one, and I can give you the footage of it. And this became a pretty regular problem with this individual. We'd take down cameras, he'd put them back up. It's one thing if it monitors like their front door and their front door only, but you really don't want a resident monitoring common areas or where your other residents are kind of coming and going. This gentleman, unfortunately, did end up evicting because it just got way, way out of hand, along with a host of other reasons. I'm not gonna give you the exact language we've used for these, or kind of like if this then that, what we've decided. With police report, maybe you only want to take one, maybe you want to take 2 or 3. With bed bugs, maybe you'll treat the first 1 or 2 times and then it's on them. This is more to just kind of open your eyes up to things you need to talk to your local legal counsel about including in your lease before it ends up costing you money. When I first started renting out properties, I would have never imagined we had some of these issues that we ended up having. It's always better to be proactive instead of reactive. I'd rather you learn from my mistakes than have to spend your money relearning lessons you can get right here. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful and ideally entertaining. We had a lot of fun making this one. Talk to you guys next time.